2016 was quite an interesting year for TV. So as part of our decade review, going back to stuff that happened in the launch of Geeky Brummie, I picked out 3 TV series that were either starting or running in that year. The first one is Netflix's only series that they don't seem to have cancelled halfway through after we're getting everybody attached to it, is Stranger Things. So that premiered on Netflix July 2016. Created by the Duffer Brothers, with EPs along with Sean Levy and Dan Cohen. So if you've not seen Stranger Things, how would I describe it? It was supposed to be an anthology series to start off with, a bit like The White Lotus. So it was supposed to be to do one season of something and then carry on and do multiple seasons of something different. That didn't happen. We just got one season spread out into 5 seasons, more stuff. But yes, so it's kind of girl with psychokinetic abilities escapes out of a lab and runs into a D&D group in the 80s full of friends, and then they try and protect her, and lots of weird stuff goes down. And the Upside Down, and there's parallel universes and monsters running around, and yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It's kind of like Stephen King meets Steven Spielberg, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think the first series very much hit that Spielberg vibe from
Goonies of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Winona Ryder, David Harbour, and now probably well-known names: Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Gaten Matarazzo, Caleb Clochan, Natalia Dyer. Quite a few big characters that have come out of that series and gone on to other things. But yeah, I mean, what did we think of Series 1? I think it's probably the most pure of the Stranger Things series, and it was actually written as an actual plot line and finishes quite nicely.
I think it's interesting as well because it almost kicked off the 80s nostalgia again, or reinvigorated it, I suppose. So I remember watching it at the time and going, oh, this is really cool. But then I think rewatching it, it's still a very good first series, but you've then got a load of other sort of films and TV and everything else that's picked up on this 80s nostalgia sort of craze over the last 10 years. But I thought as a series, it was very good. You know, it was fresh, a bit different. It was obviously very nostalgic and a love letter to 80s horror and 80s film, but it was done in a very nice sort of subtle way, I think.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of like a bunch of kids like go on an adventure within their hometown kind of thing. Like, you know, you're mentioning sort of Steven Spielberg meets Stephen King. It's got that sort of mixture of like Stand By Me with E.T. and like you mentioned the Goonies, Keith, and things like that, but obviously more horror leaning.
And it kind of respected nerd culture as well with things like D&D, and the later series did it as well. But I think, you know, things like with D&D, you could clearly see that the people who created it, they were massive D&D fans, and it, you know, that the plot and the monsters and the references, everything is D&D coded, but again, they took it very seriously and they respected the culture. I
think it certainly cemented Netflix into the British culture, because we'd kind of not, unlike the Americans where it had been a thing for quite a few years before, I think this was probably the show that kind of made people start to do the subscription-based kind of TV type of stuff. So it was so big that it was like, you know, because it was the only place you could watch it, it was the kind of thing where people would start their subscriptions to Netflix.
Yeah,
you know, it was the thing that kind of cemented Netflix as part of British culture.
Yeah.
I think there was some stuff up until that point, but it was the big kind of like flagship show for it.
Yeah, I don't think it was the first Netflix original, but I think it was.
It was the one that kind of hit that kind of big
yeah.
mainstream. It exploded into all kinds of things, didn't it? Really.
Yeah, and then streaming became such a thing after that, and it was a case of.
Yeah, I mean, it was like up until that point. I think most people, it was Sky Atlantic, all of that kind of stuff. But Stranger Things is the one that propelled Netflix to the juggernaut that it is now.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that stood out for me was that heavy synthwave Carpenter Brutti score, because it riffed so much off John Carpenter and that kind of era.
Yeah, well, I mean, Carl Dixon's soundtrack was just phenomenal, but also the remixes and covers of songs, so Heroes in the first series, which they then reused in a couple of other series, but again, just brilliant composition as a soundtrack. So
Yeah. I mean, Winona Ryder being in it had absolutely no reason for me to kind of tune in at all. But,
But I think it was kind of a callback to, it was that perfect nostalgia time, I think, for the kids who had grown up in the 80s without the internet, without kind of phones, be on your bike, going wherever you wanted, just be back by sunset, that kind of no rules kind of era of childhood.
I think it's also like what's probably triggered a lot of the discussions online, like younger people being like, wait, was that really a thing that you did in like the 80s and 90s, which you just went out and rode your bike somewhere? It's like,
drink water from the hose pipe in the lawn, just ran around and just disappeared into the woods for days. But I think it was it was perfectly pitched at that audience at that time. They were the ones with the disposable income enough to go and watch that kind of thing. Yeah, I think it was a solid show. I think looking back, I wish they would have gone with the anthology idea and moved on to a different set of characters for season 2 and then moved around. I appreciate there has been some highlights in the later seasons, but I think mixing it would have made it a much more interesting series.
I don't know if it would have been as big a phenomena as that, because anthology shows would struggle, because if you do a show and the next one isn't as good, people will drift away quite quickly. But anthology shows are hard.
I think audiences have got used to them now, though, with things like White Lotus and Love, Death and Robots and those kind of things. I
think White Lotus is much more kind of like same situation, different people.
Yeah.
You know, I think you'd have got bored if it was like Stranger Things, but somewhere else with different people.
Yeah.
Because they've had things like Fear Street and other stuff. Netflix have tried it with some of the bits and pieces, which don't kind of hit the highs. I think it's lightning in a bottle. It's one of those kind of things. It just kind of it did a thing and it kind of hit at the right time.
And I think it was a pure love story written to 80s TV and cinema and that kind of era of.
But it had that kind of going to your point, Keith, like the lightning in a bottle, because it was the first thing really for Netflix where they could merchandise it, they could expand it. So it has games, Funko Pops, all sorts of things, stage play. There's the formula and the branding. They could merchandise it into so many different platforms and mediums, which I think that's the first time Netflix could have done that. As you said, it's that kind of similar to how House of Cards, their first series, kept them afloat. I think Stranger Things really helped them, break into the mainstream with that. So.
It's one of those cultural phenomenon things. It's like X-Files. It's you just can't predict when these shows are going to be a thing. If you'd have looked at X-Files and said this is going to be one of the biggest shows of the 90s, people would have gone, yeah, maybe not. But it just did. And it's that thing. It's casting. It's scenario. It's just whatever it is. You just kind of just seem to. It all came together.
I think, it's definitely worth a rewatch if you've not watched Stranger Things, I think, and if you have any kind of interest in that D&D kind of spooky, sci-fi, urban, Stephen Kingy, Steven Spielberg-y vibe. My next selection from the TV series of 2016 and beyond is one that also started in 2016. Well, it started in December 2015 in the US, but started in 2016 over here on the unfortunately named Sci-Fi channel. If everybody remembers that. Renamed Sci-Fi channel, yes. Is The Expanse, based on the books by author James S.A. Corey. So it's set in a future where humanity has colonized the entire solar system. A random group of people get thrown together, including Thomas Jane playing a detective, Stephen Strait playing James Holden, a former ice miner, then captain of a ship called the Rocinante, and UN Security Council member Chrisjen Avasarala, who is played by Shara Dashulu, which I've probably got that name wrong, and I apologise to her. But yes, so this was a show that had a rocky history. So 3 seasons on Syfy, then got cancelled, and then everyone's favourite multi-billionaire Jeff Bezos liked it a lot. So we decided to get Amazon Prime to buy it and continue the series for another 3 seasons after it was cancelled on Syfy. But yes, I really love this. It's probably one of the closest hard sci-fi series that have been around for quite a while now. A similar kind of tone to like BSG reboot and that kind of dark, slightly depressing future of, corporations are still in charge and everything sucks in the solar system, but everybody's trying to make their way. And yes, I really love it. I don't know if anybody else has watched it.
I didn't see it until it came to Amazon. For some reason, don't know why. But I did kind of, I wouldn't say binge it, but I did catch up with it quite quickly because I did think it was a really good show.
Yes.
And the characters were really great. And I mean, it's had such an impact, it has spun off into other mediums. I know there's been at least one game, which is a Telltale game, I believe.
I can't remember that.
Drummer as the main character.
I don't remember, but I know there is one coming out soon, I think.
Yeah.
Osiris Reborn. That's in development at the moment, I think. So.
Yeah. And there's been comics based around it as well. So I think there's a comics continuation that follows on from the end of the series, which is quite good. But yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, one of the more better sci-fi series, I think, that have been around in the previous few years. Started out quite slow, I think. The first couple of episodes was finding its feet, and then towards the end of season 1, it kind of really built up to a big crescendo. And
it was a definite mood. I think for me, it was a little bit, like you said, in not Battlestar Galactica, and also Babylon 5.
yes,
I thought it had a very kind of Babylon 5 feel.
Yeah.
It was like, things aren't going to go well here. This is not Star Trek.
yeah.
Which I thought which was really nice.
Yeah, and I think that mainly due to the success of James Corey's books, but I believe Mark Fergus, Hawkins, who were the showrunners, did a really great adaptation. The sets feel really lived in. The style of the place feels like an actual crafted universe, and it feels like this is believable. It doesn't pull into the Star Trekky side.
But also for me, one of the best things, title sequence.
Yes.
Like it had a proper title sequence, which changed over the course of the series, and the music was really good as well.
Yeah.
So I do like a title sequence, and also it was in the times where it didn't say skip. So I like that.
Yeah.
Had the book series finished by the time the series started? Did it have that problem of catching up with the books, or was it?
I don't think it has. I think he's still writing them. Well, 2021 was the last book that came out, and there's lots of short stories and novellas around it. So I don't think it's had that issue, but I think they actually finished it pretty much before they got into the later books anyway, because there was such a depth of content. The books are like 500 pages each. So there is a chunky amount of content in there. I mean, compared to other Amazon adaptations, yes, it's much better than some of the other Amazon adaptations that have been foisted upon us, put it that way.
I think it worked, but in a way kind of dislocated itself probably from the books. It kind of told its own kind of self-contained story in a way. Yeah. I didn't feel like I was missing out from not reading the books. It seemed like a very contained story. And I think how it ended as well, I would have liked it to continue because I was really invested in the world and the characters, but I felt it kind of wrapped itself up quite nicely in a way that was like, it was satisfying, even though I would have liked another season or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's some fantastic guest spots and stars that join later on as well throughout the series. I mean, it is a really great ensemble piece. Yeah. It's not just a one or two cast members. It's a great one that pulls together. I mean, I would say it's probably the greatest sci-fi series of the last 10 years. I can't think of anything similar that's come out.
You've had contenders, like Apple TV have had things like Foundation.
And For All Mankind, I suppose.
And For All Mankind. But I think this is the series that set the tone for that kind of thing. It had been a while since Galactica had finished. But I thought it proved that there was still, space for a space set TV show with spaceships.
Yes.
I like the fact we had spaceships. And I kind of like the mechanics of like how they used missiles and bullets and stuff. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know, the battle sequences were always pretty dynamic and kind of really interesting.
And they were kind of not realistic, but realistic. The weaponry, the technology of the time, it's not.
Well, just the fact that ships had to slow down and stuff. It was like, it's kind of cool that like ships you couldn't stop a ship dead. There was no
inertial
it understood
adapters,
science and inertia and all the rest of it. It was kind of a real hard sci-fi.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's what I quite liked about Battlestar Galactica, where it's that kind of thing. Whenever they had like the space fights, the sound would be kind of muted. It was still obviously a little bit unrealistic, but it had that little bit more.
It's a vacuum.
It wasn't the Star
It's a
Wars pew
vacuum.
pew pew pew. It was more.
Yeah, I mean, it's all on Amazon Prime nowadays, and I urge you, if you are looking for a bit of hard sci-fi, a bit more realistic sci-fi, it's definitely something worth going back and watching.
Yeah.
And hope that they can find some way to continue it, as you said, through comic books and stories and other media. But I really would recommend it. So the final series that I'm talking about for 2016 is one that was already aired prior to 2016, but this was a kind of real turning point, I would say, in the series, which is Game of Thrones Season 6. So this was at the height of Game of Thrones mania 10 years ago, when pretty much it dominated the TV spectrum. Everything kind of ran away and hid from it when it was on air, because that's all it was. It was the water cooler show. You had David Benioff, D.B. Wise, and I think this is the bit where cracks started to show a little bit, where they ran out of George W. Martin's material to crib off. Put it that way, maybe.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because I think if you hadn't read the books, from my experience anyway, because I hadn't read the books at the time, I was still enjoying it. I was seeing a few things, but I was still on the whole enjoying it. But then some of my friends who had read the books, there were a few clear deviations in Series 6, because obviously that's where they'd sort of caught up.
Yeah.
Where they'd started to see the red flags first. So there's almost like an interesting, as you said, it was a turning point, but it was an interesting sort of divide between those who've read the books and could see the car crash coming, and I was still just blissfully going, oh, this is fun. Yeah. But what I did enjoy was the whole, as you said, the water cooler. Like, I remember in work at the time, and we would all just meet at lunchtime to discuss it. I've never really had that with another show, so it was still, I still enjoyed that element of it,
Yeah. And I think it changed the TV landscape as well, because it was a very much 18 rated TV series. And we've had so many other ones come since then of that kind of blood and boobs, basically, and battle to a certain extent. I mean, it's an adaptation of the War of the Roses, so it was a dark time in English history, as it was. But I think they really lent into it being an adult TV show for adults. And over $100 million to make this season. I think, as you said, it was kind of that. This probably finishes on one of the greatest episodes of TV, which is the Battle of the Bastards, and I think it's one of the best episodes of Game of Thrones by a country mile. And then I think after that is where wheels start falling off the trolley pretty quickly. But I mean, it's one of those things, because we've had other series spawn off the back of it. We've had House of Dragon, which has done reasonably well. Night of the Seven Kingdoms has just finished its run over here, and that's done really well. So that universe is still regarded as well. However, Game of Thrones, the show, I think I'm still pissed off at the ending of Game of Thrones, to be fair.
But I think what's interesting, sort of tying Stranger Things and Game of Thrones together, is so Stranger Things, how it ended, without any spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it, but I don't think it was necessarily that bad. Where they ended up was fine. I think how they got there wasn't great, but the collective trauma from Gen Z of this was quite interesting, because having had that trauma from Game of Thrones, I was a little bit less like, I was more desensitized to it. You know, like all the at the end of Game of Thrones, there was all these theories. Actually, something else was going to happen, and this, that, and the other. And I remember like speaking to Gen Z colleagues and on TikTok and stuff. There's all this kind of like secret episode of Stranger Things to explain it all, and I was like, no, hun,
We
it's
found
fine.
all these clues in the episode. Like the behind the scenes thing is secretly a new episode. You know, that was
It's like, my dear sweet summer child, you weren't there for Game of Thrones.
But I think that was the thing of, I think both shows have fell into that they were writing it as they were filming it, and it became just a case of, we'll just keep writing, keep filming.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up though, because it's like I'd already experienced that before Game of Thrones with Lost.
Yes.
So I was just like, oh well, I'm not trusting a TV show ever again.
Yeah, and I think with all those instances, it's like there's also an element of the hype. Like you just can never, and it happens with games all the time. Like fans, in some ways, are actually the worst because you can just never manage these expectations. I mean, yes, the writing wasn't great, but also they could have written the best thing ever, and it would not have competed with the hype that they generated.
I mean, looking at this season in particular, season 6, 94% approval rate on Rotten Tomato. Every single episode is above 85 on a score. Average rating of 8.25 out of 10. Metacritic at its 73 out of 100. Generally favourable. It was kind of one of the better reviewed seasons of TV, and it is a fantastic thing to go back and watch. If it was me, I'd probably just watch up to season 6 and stop. And this was the big award-winning season. I think that it was one where they had loads of Emmy nominations. They had, I think it was outstanding cast, guest series, casting, cinematography. Then we talked about the cinematography in the final season, and it's a different world. Yeah, so it was that season of everything was just like, everything was Game of Thrones themes. There was Game of Thrones watch parties. I remember us talking about it on the podcast back then. It was on the radio show. It was one thing that we picked up quite often. And it was kind of, you couldn't escape Game of Thrones. Even if you wanted to escape Game of Thrones, for 2016, it was just everywhere.
Well, I mean, speaking of Lost, Game of Thrones then had like the show you watched after Game of Thrones, where they dissected the episode, invited the cast on, and all the rest of it. You know, yeah, similar to Lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think 3 shows back from 2016, some of which went on to better things, some of which
2 I watched.
Yeah,
1 I didn't.
Yeah,
I watched one.
Wonder which one it is, Keith. Sword and sorcery, not your thing.
I do. No, that's not true. I do like Sword and Sorcery. I like Hawk the Slayer. So come on,
Hawk the Slayer's rubbish.
I went to the cinema. I went to the cinema to see Krull.
Yes, Krull I love. I will not hear a bad word against Krull.
I do like a good Sword and Sorcery thing because I do like a sword as a weapon. It's my kind of weapon of choice. Highlander.
Yes, we know about your D&D character and the sword that he can't use.
Look, swords are great.
But yeah, so I think 2 of those shows are definitely worth watching back. One of them is I'd watched some of it back and probably never laid my eyes on that final season ever again, just because of the vitriol that still burns in my soul for that finale. But yes. Anyway, go and give them a watch if you fancy them. The Geeky Brummie podcast is presented by Rowan Parish, featuring Keith Bloomfield, Lee Price and Matt Lovell. It's produced by Vivian Parish and recorded at Millennium Point in Birmingham. You can find more information about Geeky Brummie at our socials at Geeky Brummie and on our website at geekybrummie.com. This has been a Geeky Brummie production. Ta-ra, Ribbit.